Under the soft shimmer of chandeliers shaped like frozen stars, the hum of wealth whispered through every corner of La Belle Étoile, the most exclusive restaurant nestled in the beating heart of the city. It was a night draped in velvet stillness, broken only by the delicate elegance of a piano weaving through the air. Every table was a quiet kingdom of power and prestige, lit by candles and crowned by crystal dot. In the farthest corner, tucked behind an arrangement of lilies and shadow, sat Michael Thornton, 48 years old, tech mogul, billionaire, and widower. His tailored Brioni suit fit him perfectly, his gold watch catching stray flickers of light, but none of it could mask the emptiness in his chest. He stared blankly at the untouched filet mignon before him, its aroma rich and inviting, though it might as well have been ashes. Across from him, the empty chair echoed louder than any sound in the room. His fingers tightened slightly around the stem of a burgundy glass, the red swirl inside dancing like a ghost. 10 years had passed since the accident, since his wife Eleanor and their 3-year-old daughter Sophie had vanished from the world in the crush of twisted metal and shattered glass. Since then, Michael had filled his life with silence, routine, and an empire of distractions. He lifted the glass slowly, as if the weight of it held memories, but just as he brought it to his lips, a voice broke the air beside him, soft, trembling, unexpected. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" Michael froze. He turned his head sharply and found himself looking down at a young woman standing beside his table. She could not have been older than 19. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose, messy bun, with strands falling out in weary curls. Her coat was threadbare, clinging to her shoulders against the early autumn chill. In her arms was a baby, perhaps 7 or 8 months old, wrapped in a faded blanket. The infant's eyes, wide and luminous, were fixed on the mound of mashed potatoes and slices of meat, still steaming on Michael's plate. The girl's voice had been almost a whisper, yet somehow it sliced through the quiet of the restaurant like a violin string snapping. Michael blinked, as if waking from a long, dense sleep. Around him, the room's stilled forks paused mid-air. Conversations trailed into stunned silence. A waiter began to step forward, concern already wrinkling his brow. But Michael raised a hand subtly. The gesture was small, yet commanding. He studied her face. There was no shame in her expression, no hint of manipulation or pity-seeking, only exhaustion and something deeper, a quiet fierceness, a need not for herself, but for the tiny life held close to her chest. She held the child with the kind of protective devotion that stripped everything else from the moment. She was not begging. She was not stealing. She was surviving. Michael's throat tightened. The candle between them flickered. In that instant, something shifted inside him, not a grand epiphany, not yet, but a murmur, a spark. And though he did not know it then, that one moment, that single question, would dismantle the walls he had spent a decade building and lead him toward a redemption he never sought, through a love he never expected. He stood there for a long moment, frozen, his gaze locked on the girl as if the rest of the world had melted away into background noise. Her auburn hair was unbrushed, falling in disheveled waves around her face and shoulders, the strands catching glimmers of candlelight like broken copper. Her coat barely covered her frame, sleeves too short, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. On her feet were a pair of sneakers, tattered, soaked in city grime, and nearly splitting at the seams. But it was not her appearance that made Michael's breath catch. It was her eyes. They did not beg. They did not waver. They held him, unflinching, filled with something far stronger than desperation, defiance, dignity, and a quiet, almost unbearable sorrow. There was a kind of courage in her expression, the type a person only forges when they have nothing left to protect except the fragile life they carry. She was not asking for herself. She was asking for her child. Michael hesitated, just a heartbeat, longer, as if some unseen thread was being pulled taut between them. Then, with a slight movement, he nudged the plate forward. "Take it," he said softly, almost to himself. She did not dive at the food. She did not devour it like someone starving. Instead, with a reverence that struck him harder than any scream could have, she reached into the satchel draped across her shoulder and took out a small square of cloth. Clean, though fraying at the edges, she carefully wrapped the mashed potatoes and the remaining slices of meat inside, folding the corners like she was preserving treasure, not leftovers. Then, kneeling gently onto one knee, she cradled the baby closer and retrieved a small plastic spoon from her coat pocket. Michael watched, unblinking, as she scooped a modest portion of the warm food and blew softly on it, before guiding the spoon to the baby's mouth. The child opened instinctively, his tiny lips parting, his tongue reaching. The moment the mashed potatoes touched his tongue, he cooed, a soft, gurgling sound of joy, so pure it made Michael's fingers curl around the edge of the table. The baby's face lit up in the glow of candlelight, his chubby hands patting the girl's chest, a smile blooming across his round cheeks like a sunrise after a long, frozen night. It was the kind of smile Michael had not seen in years, not since his own daughter. Something caught in his throat. He looked away, just for a second, trying to clear the sudden mist from his vision, but his eyes snapped back as soon as the baby let out another happy sigh, as if the warmth of one spoonful was enough to fill him with delight. The girl said nothing. She simply kept feeding him, one spoonful at a time, with infinite patience. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She did not once look around to see who might be judging her, or what opinions were forming in the silent sea of wealthy onlookers. She was there for one reason only, to feed her son. Michael's heart twisted in his chest, slow and deep, like something old waking from a coma. It was not pity, it was not charity. It was the undeniable truth that he was witnessing something. Secrete, a kind of love that could not be bought, replaced, or even fully understood by those who had never felt loss. When the baby seemed full, the girl carefully tucked the cloth bundle into her bag, adjusted the blanket around the child's body, and stood. She glanced once more at Michael, nodding slightly, not as if to thank him, but as if to acknowledge something unspoken between them. Then she turned and walked away, weaving through the rows of white linen tables, out into the cool night beyond the glass doors. Michael remained seated, unable to move, staring at the spot where she had stood. The candle on the table flickered, softly, casting gentle waves of gold and shadow across the untouched wine, the empty chair, the world he had known. Then, before he could rationalize or analyze or talk himself out of it, he rose, not hurriedly, not dramatically, just quietly, with purpose. He placed his napkin on the table, nodded once at the stunned waiter who hovered nearby, and followed the girl through the heavy restaurant doors into the night. He did not yet understand why, only that he had to. Michael followed at a distance, his footsteps muffled against the quiet pavement. The city noise faded behind him as the girl slipped down a narrow alleyway, clutching the baby to her chest like a fragile shield against the world. She moved quickly but cautiously, as if every shadow might swallow her whole. He did not know why he followed, only that something deeper than curiosity pulled him along. It was not pity, it was recognition. The alley opened into a crumbling parking lot, flanked by brick buildings. Abandoned cars sat like ghosts, but one, an old dented silver sedan, was different. It was lived in. The windows were fogged, the paint was peeling, but it was shelter. She walked to it without hesitation, opened the back door, and carefully settled in with the baby. A thin blanket served as a mattress. She cradled the infant in her arms, whispering something only the child could hear. Then her voice rose, soft and trembling, to a lullaby. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Michael lingered in the shadows, transfixed. The baby's hand gripped her collar, eyes fluttering as the melody wrapped around him like a warm quilt. The setting was bleak, but the love undeniable. He stepped forward. Something must have alerted her. She turned, startled. Their eyes locked. "I'm sorry," he said, hands raised in peace. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." "You followed me," she said, guarded. "Yes, I did." She didn't run. She didn't cry. She only looked at him, weighing the stranger in the expensive clothes. "I saw how you fed your son," Michael said. "I've never seen anything like that. I needed to understand." After a pause, she said quietly, "His name is Liam. I'm Sarah." "Liam," he repeated. 8 months. She nodded. "He loves mashed potatoes." Michael's voice dropped. "So did my daughter." Sarah blinked, and in that instant, something shifted. She didn't pry, just listened with that rare stillness of someone who knew grief firsthand. "I was studying to be a teacher," she said. "Then I got pregnant. The father disappeared. My parents disowned me. I've been on my own ever since." She spoke plainly, without bitterness. Michael looked at the vehicle, the worn blanket, the baby clothes stacked like treasure in the corner. "I can help. A hotel, food, whatever you need." She raised a hand. "No, I'm not asking for money." Surprised, he asked, "Then what do you want?" Sarah looked at Liam and said softly, "Just one day. One day where he's warm, full, and safe. That's all." The words hit him harder than any demand ever could. The streetlight flickered above them, casting an amber hue over her face. In that glow, Michael saw something familiar, her eyes, his late wife's eyes, not exactly, but close enough to crack something inside him. The way Sarah clutched her child, the way she stood tall with nothing but love as armor, it stirred something in him, something that had been buried with his wife and daughter. He stepped back, suddenly unsteady. "Thank you," he said. Sarah furrowed her brow. "For what?" "For reminding me I still have a heart." She said nothing, only cradled Liam tighter, resuming the lullaby. Michael stood there a little longer, the song threading through the night like a lifeline, and though Sarah didn't smile, she didn't close the door either, and that, somehow, was everything. From that night on, Michael could not shake the image of the girl with the broken shoes and the baby with the mashed potato smile. No matter how many emails he skimmed through or board meetings he attended, their faces stayed with him, quiet reminders that somewhere in the same city where people drank $8,000 wine, a mother and child were surviving on kindness and resilience alone. He never spoke to her again, not right away. Instead, he began to act silently and precisely, the way he'd built his fortune. He found her car again, parked behind an abandoned warehouse lot. Without approaching, without intruding, he left small packages near the vehicle in the early mornings before sunrise: a canister of baby formula, a pack of diapers, a sealed container of homemade soup still warm to the touch. He arranged for a pediatrician to make a discreet visit, pretending to be part of a community outreach program. Sarah didn't know who had sent him. She didn't ask. But when the doctor left, she held Liam longer than usual and whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular. At first, Sarah was skeptical. She had learned to survive by expecting disappointment. But these quiet gestures never came with notes, never came with expectations or requests. No one asked her to smile. No one asked her to be grateful. It was simply there, steady, gentle, real. Little by little, suspicion gave way to something more dangerous. Hope. Then one evening, as October cold began seeping deeper into the nights, disaster struck. Liam had been cranky all afternoon, refusing to eat, his forehead warm. But by nightfall, he was burning with fever. Sarah tried everything: cool cloths, gentle lullabies, rocking him back and forth in the back seat of their car, but his cries grew more urgent, his breathing shallow and fast. She rushed to the nearest hospital emergency room. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when Sarah explained that her son needed help. When asked about insurance, Sarah hesitated. When she said she didn't have any, the woman's face hardened. "We're at full capacity," she said curtly. "You'll need to wait or find another facility." Sarah's voice broke. "He's only a baby. He has a fever of 104. He's not responding. Please, ma'am, there's nothing we can do without proper intake. I'm sorry." Sarah stepped outside, her breath clouding in the freezing air. Liam had gone quieter, terrifying silence. She held him tighter than ever, her body shaking with cold and panic. There was only one thing left she could do. She pulled out her old phone, her fingers trembling as she typed just 2 words: "Help us." She didn't know if he would come. She didn't even know why she trusted that he might. But 6 minutes later, headlights swept across the curb. Michael's black SUV screeched to a halt. He jumped out before the engine stopped, his coat flaring in the wind, eyes wild with urgency. He didn't speak. He simply held out his arms. Sarah placed Liam into them, and for the first time, the baby did not resist. His tiny hand curled around Michael's index finger, weak but intentional, as if recognizing something safe. Michael cradled him with surprising familiarity and strode back into the hospital without waiting in line. "I want a doctor now," he said to the receptionist, voice steel and fire. "This child has a critical fever. I will cover every cent, but if you let one more minute pass, I will buy this hospital and fire every last one of you." They took Liam immediately. Sarah sat in the hallway, shivering with exhaustion, her head in her hands. Michael stayed by her side, silent. When the nurse returned with updates, Liam was stable, resting, and would be monitored overnight. Sarah exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since sunset. She looked at Michael, eyes glassy, voice barely audible. "You came." He nodded. "Of course I did." Tears spilled over before she could stop them. She leaned into him, chest heaving with relief and something deeper, grief, maybe, or release. Her head rested against his shoulder, and Michael, without hesitation, wrapped his arms around her. He did not ask her to calm down. He did not ask her to explain herself. He just held her as the quiet hours of the night passed outside. Those sterile fluorescent walls. It was the first time Sarah had let herself fall apart since she'd become a mother. And for Michael, it was the first time in 10 years that holding someone didn't feel like betrayal. They did not speak of love. They did not define anything that night. But something shifted irrevocably in that moment. In the steady heartbeat of the man who had once sworn never to care again. And in the breath of the girl who had only known how to survive, not because he had rescued her, but because, finally, she did not have to be strong alone. It began with a photo, slightly blurry, taken at night, of Michael Thornton exiting an emergency room with a baby in his arms and a young woman close behind. Within hours, it flooded social media, blogs, and tabloid headlines. Tech billionaire's late-night rescue, teen mom and the tycoon. The internet exploded. Sarah's identity didn't stay private for long. A leaked hospital intake form confirmed her name. Then came the commentary waves of speculation, judgment, and cruelty. Some praised Michael, calling him compassionate, generous. Others were vicious. She's a gold digger. This was planned. What kind of man gets caught up in something like this? In the apartment Michael had arranged for her and Liam, Sarah sat in darkness, the only light from her phone. Each swipe brought more venom, each headline more shame. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled. She turned off the screen, afraid the light alone might touch her son with that same poison. Liam stirred in his crib. She stood and gently placed a hand over his chest, soothing him. Then she sat back down on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor until morning. When Michael walked in, he knew something had changed. Sarah's posture was closed off, her expression distant. "I can't do this," she said. "I don't want my son growing up in scandal. I don't want him seeing lies one day and wondering if they're true." Michael sat beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "Neither did Liam." She shook her head. "People don't care. They already decided who I am." Michael's voice steadied. "Then let me tell them who you really are." That afternoon, he called his publicist. No statements, no scripted press release. He wanted to speak plainly, publicly, and with no filters. The next night, he went live on national television. The setup was simpler, quiet studio, soft lighting, no distractions. The interviewer asked nothing shocking, just gave him space to speak. Michael began, not with Sarah, but with Eleanor and Sophie. He told the story he had avoided for years, the accident, the silence, the way grief had hollowed him out. He talked about the illusion of success and how it had hidden a very real emptiness. "I stopped living the day they died," he said. And then he spoke of Sarah. She wasn't looking for charity. He said, she wasn't even looking for help. She just wanted to feed her son, and in doing so, she woke something in me I thought I had lost forever. His voice cracked as he added, "She didn't take anything from me. She gave me something no one else could, a reason to care again, a reason to breathe." He looked into the camera. "Sarah is not a headline. She is a mother. Liam is not a prop. He is a beautiful child. I did not save them. They saved me." The interview was raw, unguarded, and deeply human. And it worked. The next morning, the tide shifted. Online conversations changed. People began defending her. Mothers shared their stories: single parenthood, poverty, judgment. Teachers spoke up, explaining how many girls like Sarah fall through the cracks. Donations started flowing into shelters. A mother in Oregon started a community fund for women just like Sarah. Sarah didn't speak to the press. But the next morning, she showed up at Michael's front door, Liam bundled against the cold. She didn't knock. He opened the door before she could. Her eyes were tired but determined. "I'm not leaving," she said. "If you still want us, we're here." Michael did not speak. He stepped aside, let them in, and for the first time in years, he felt something shift, permanent and peaceful. A door, not just in his home, but in his heart, opened. A family, unexpected and unscripted, had begun. The apartment Michael rented for them was nothing extravagant, modest by his standards, but warm, sunlit, and quiet. It had 2 bedrooms, soft blue walls, and windows that caught the morning light just right. Sarah moved in with nothing but 2 duffel bags, a baby carrier, and the weight of someone who had never been given a safe place to exhale. But within a week, That space began to feel lived, in pictures colored by Liam taped to the fridge, small socks draped over the heater, the scent of baby lotion and lullabies lingering in the air. They never discussed what they were to each other. Not at first. There were no declarations, no labels, no timelines. They simply lived together. Michael visited every morning. At first, it was under the pretense of checking in, bringing groceries or a package of diapers. But soon, it became routine. He would knock, let himself in, and Liam would light up with recognition, bouncing in his crib at the sound of the door. Sarah would already have coffee brewing, her hair pulled into that same loose, graceful knot, and they would share breakfast. Stories. Michael learned how to hold a baby bottle at just the right angle, how to warm milk without overheating it, how to change a diaper clumsily at first, then with a confidence that surprised even him. He memorized the rhythm of Liam's cries, understood the difference between hunger and discomfort, tiredness and frustration. One afternoon, as he rocked Liam to sleep, the baby's small hand clinging to his shirt, Michael realized something. Simple, but seismic. He didn't want to leave. Not after the nap, not after the next hour. He wanted to stay. Sarah noticed it. Tooth away, Michael lingered. How he listened to Liam's babbles like they were symphonies. He never tried to impress or control. He simply showed up, day after day, with quiet hands and eyes that had once been hollow, but were now slowly refilling with light. She had never known love that didn't ask for anything back, but she had never known a man to simply be present, not to fix her, not to own her story, but to walk beside her in it. In the soft hours between feedings and bath times, a new kind of connection formed. It was not the fiery kind of love the world romanticized. It was slower, deeper, born not from passion but from persistence. One evening, after Liam had finally fallen asleep, Sarah and Michael sat on the balcony in silence, a blanket draped between them. The city below glimmered in gold and blue, but neither of them looked down. Michael turned toward her, his voice gentle. When I lost Eleanor and Sophie, I thought that part of me died with them, the part that wanted to care, to belong, to be needed. Sarah looked at him, eyes glistening in the moonlight. You didn't lose it, she whispered. It just waited. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't have to. The moment stretched between them like a promise, unspoken but deeply understood. And in that moment, Sarah smiled, not the kind of smile she gave doctors out of politeness or Liam, out of reflex. This one was just for him, full and rare. For the first time in years, Michael smiled back, a real smile, quiet, softened by healing, lit from within. They were not yet lovers, they were not yet a family in name, but they were something stronger to people who had been broken open by loss and found in each other the slow and steady beginning of home. It came one afternoon in a plain white envelope, wedged beneath the apartment door like an unexpected gust of wind. Sarah stared at it for a long time before opening it, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was familiar, tight, neat, and unmistakably her mother's. There were only a few lines, no grand apology, no dramatic pleas, just simple words written in ink that seemed to press too hard on the page. If there's still a chance to know my grandson, I would like to try. Sarah sat at the kitchen table for over an hour. The letter crumpled gently in her hands as Liam played nearby with his stack of colorful blocks. She didn't cry, she didn't get angry, but the silence that filled the room was thick enough to suffocate. When Michael arrived that evening, he found her in the same spot. She wrote, Sarah said quietly, without looking up. He walked over, picked up the letter, and read it. Then he sat it down and took a seat beside her. What are you thinking? He asked. I don't know, she admitted. It's been almost 2 years since they last spoke to me, since they told me I was no longer their daughter. Michael nodded slowly. You don't owe them anything. Sarah turned to him, eyes clouded with uncertainty. But Liam, doesn't he deserve to know where he comes from, even if it's broken? Michael paused, choosing his words carefully. Don't let him grow up with the same emptiness you had. Let him have the chance to forgive, or not, but let him choose. 3 days later, they drove to the town Sarah once called home, a sleepy stretch of green hills and narrow roads where every face seemed to remember the past a little too well. Her parents' house stood at the end of a gravel driveway, the white paint slightly faded, the porch swing still creaking in the wind. Sarah stood outside for several long moments, Liam on her hip, his tiny hands gripping her sweater. Michael stood slightly behind her, offering quiet support but letting her lead. The front door opened slowly. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, sharp features softened by time and sorrow. Sarah's mother. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, with a trembling breath, her mother stepped forward. Her eyes landed on Liam, then on Sarah, and they filled instantly with tears. "I wasn't strong," she whispered, her voice catching. "I was scared of what people would think, of losing the version of you I thought I raised. And I lost you anyway." Sarah said nothing, her lips parted slightly, her jaw tightening. Her father appeared behind her mother, older than she remembered, his hands folded nervously in front of him. He looked at his grandson like he was seeing something holy. Liam reached out a hand, not knowing the history, not caring, just curious, and that, somehow, shattered everything. Her mother broke down, stepping forward, arms open but uncertain. May I hold him?" Sarah hesitated, only a moment, then slowly she placed Liam in her mother's arms. The older woman clutched him, as if trying to hold time itself. She sobbed softly, whispering things to the boy, who blinked up at her with innocent wonder. Michael watched from the side, his chest tight. He wasn't part of this moment, but he was witness to its power. When Sarah finally stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother, the porch seemed to breathe. The past had not disappeared, but it had been softened. Forgiveness was not a lightning strike, it was a slow sunrise. That afternoon, the 3 generations sat around the old kitchen table where Sarah once ate cereal before school. Her mother served tea. Her father bounced Liam gently on his knee, and for the first time in years, there was laughter in that house. Sarah caught Michael's gaze from across the room, and he smiled. She mouthed 2 simple words, "Thank you." He shook his head, smiling back. "No," he whispered to himself, barely audible, "thank you for going home." 1 year later, the world had changed, but only in the ways that mattered. The noise had faded, the headlines were gone. In their place was something far quieter, far more powerful. A life. It was a bright spring afternoon when they returned to the park, the same park where it all began. The breeze moved gently through the trees, and the golden sunlight bathed the open field in a warmth that felt like a benediction. There were no towering floral arches, or photographers jostling for the perfect shot, just a small group of close friends, a white linen cloth spread beneath an old oak tree, and a humble wooden arch wrapped with ivy and ribbon. At the center of it all stood a little boy in a navy vest and matching bow tie. Liam, now nearly 2 years old, clutched a small velvet box in both hands as he wobbled across the grass, determined to deliver it to the man waiting just a few steps away. Michael stood there, not in a designer suit, but in a soft grey blazer that Sarah had once told him made him look almost human. His hair was longer now, with threads of silver he no longer bothered to hide. His eyes, once clouded by grief, now sparkled with something far rarer than wealth-hope. As Liam reached him, Michael knelt down and took the box gently from his tiny fingers. The boy looked up and giggled, then toddled back to the edge of the clearing where Sarah stood, barefoot on the grass, her white dress fluttering in the breeze. She had never looked more beautiful, not because of the dress, not because of the sun behind her, but because of the life in her eyes, the kind of radiance that only grows after surviving darkness. Michael stepped forward, box in hand, and dropped to one knee. For a moment, the wind seemed to still, as if the world itself paused to listen. He looked up at her, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You didn't ask for anything," he said softly. "You didn't beg, you didn't expect. You just showed up on the worst night of your life and gave me a chance to remember what it feels like to be needed, to be alive." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, elegant, unflashy, chosen not for its price but for the way it would look on her hand when she held their son. "You didn't take my leftovers, Sarah," he whispered. "You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. You gave me family, you gave me love, you gave me a future." He paused, tears glimmering in his eyes. "Will you marry me?" Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filled before the first tear could even fall. She nodded, once, twice, then dropped to her knees in front of him, laughing through her tears as she whispered, "Yes." They embraced, arms folding into one another, like pieces of a puzzle long lost and finally found. The minister began the ceremony, simple and short, while Liam played with the petals on the ground, occasionally glancing up as if trying to understand what made the grown-up so emotional. But it was during the vows, right as Michael promised to love, not just Sarah, but the son who had brought them together, that Liam wandered up and wrapped his arms around Michael's leg. "Daddy," he chirped. And just like that, the entire park held its breath. Michael looked down, eyes wet, and bent to pick up the boy, holding him with one arm, and Sarah with the other. He whispered, "I love you, son." In that embrace, under the sun, with no audience but a few friends and the sky, everything that had once been broken felt whole again. Michael had not rescued a young mother. She had rescued him from grief, from isolation, from a life so polished and empty it had nearly swallowed him whole. And in the place of loneliness, a new family had been born, not from blood, not from planning, but from a whisper, a question, and a plate of mashed potatoes. They were not perfect, they didn't need to be, they were together, and that, finally, was enough. And so, from a single whisper in a luxury restaurant, a story of love, redemption, and second chances unfolded. What began as a request for leftovers became a journey that redefined what it means to be a family. Michael didn't just open his heart, he opened his life. Sarah didn't just survive, she found home. And little Liam, once cradled in a stranger's arms, now walks beside a father who chose him, not by blood, but by love. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary stories are born from the quietest moments. If this story touched your heart, made you feel, made you hope, or even brought a tear to your eye, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Kindness Power, the channel where every story is made to heal your soul and remind you that compassion is the most powerful miracle of all. We'll see you in the next story.